Oh, I guess I never hit record. Okay. So, the Speaker of the House has a considerable amount of power. We haven't talked about committees yet in much detail at all, but one of the things that he does is the Speaker of the House basically controls committee appointments. Committee appointments are really important, all right? Because when you get to Congress, if you ever become a congressman, the goal as a congressman is to get on a committee that makes you look good, right? Okay? So there's a whole hierarchy as to what committees you want people to be in or don't want to be on or whatnot. Okay? Now, also understand that those committees, some of them are important to some people but not important to others, right? For instance, if you're a representative from Iowa, would you want to be on the agricultural committee?
Yes.
Yes, right? If you are a representative from Alaska, do you want to be on the agricultural committee? No. They don't grow nothing in Alaska. They grow ice cubes. That's it. Okay? If you were a representative from Alaska, what committee do you think you might want to be on?
Environmental.
Oil. Energy is what I would say, because you oil up there, right? Maybe environmental, except Alaska's not like, they're not really into saving the environment. I mean, they're just not. Okay? And then, in all honesty, Alaska doesn't need to be into saving the environment, because it's a huge state, and there's not very many people that live there. So the number of people that they have versus the amount of land that they have, they can't do much damage anyways. Right? So the committees that you get on matter. Okay? They also matter because as bills are introduced, those bills are put into committees. Okay? And so when a bill goes into a committee, if it's something that's a hot button issue and you want to get done or talked about or whatever, right? If you're in that important committee that's relevant, the bill comes to you, you get to influence. Excuse me. You get to influence it. Okay? The Speaker of the House is also relatively important because if Trump and Pence were to both be killed at the exact same time, well, we have an amendment that actually outlines an entire list of succession. Right? Speaker of the House becomes President of the United States if the President and the Vice President are killed at the same time. Okay. In fact, the amendment outlines it in so much detail that we now have what's called the designated survivor, which I'm sure you've heard of because it's a TV show with Kiefer Sutherland. And we actually had a designated survivor Tuesday night in Trump's joint address to Congress. Because if somebody had blown up the Capitol building at that point with everybody in there, somebody got to be in charge. All right, that happened to be the Secretary of Veterans Affairs that night, in case you cared. All right, you then have majority and minority leaders. Okay, so in the House of Representatives, it goes Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House, and then in all honesty, nobody cares. But there is a majority and a minority leader. The minority leader is relatively important because that's the leader of the Democratic Party. Who is the current minority leader? Nancy Pelosi. Okay, I don't expect you to know who the majority leader is. I don't care. Okay? Partisan positions chosen by party members. They're actually voted on. Speaker of the House, same way. Alright? They do work as sort of floor leaders. They are there to sort of work in trying to keep that rank and file membership in line and make sure people do what they're supposed to. They both have whips. That is a real position. Okay, majority and minority whip. Okay, those are the people that actually metaphorically crack the whip if you don't do what you're supposed to do. Okay. Now, the Senate. The leader of the Senate is the Vice President of the United States of America. Okay, the actual Vice President of the United States of America. In fact, you know all those you had one job memes?
Yeah.
Here's the vice presidents. You had one job. This is the only real job. Alright? I've jokingly said I would like to be vice president because it's the greatest job ever.
It's like backup quarterback. You sit there.
Yeah, you still gotta practice and work out.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's just like backup quarterback. Just practice, make money, and sit there.
No, you don't even have to practice your, literally I would spend the majority of my time as vice president golfing. Probably, who cares? He literally has no real responsibilities, except to preside over the Senate. Except he doesn't preside over the Senate because they appoint this guy, the President Pro Temp, to preside over the Senate. And Mike Pence only walks his happy behind down to the Senate in instances in which you have a 50-50 tie, like the confirmation of Betsy DeVos. DeVos, however you say that woman's last name. It's DeVos?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I should probably learn, considering she's the secretary of the department I work for, but whatever. Alright. Now, then, in Congress, so you have the President Pro Temp, and he's technically fourth in line to the presidency, but that's really a ceremonial position too, and all he does is sort of like control the flow of what's going on the floor. What really matters in the Senate is the majority leader. That's currently Mitch McConnell from Kentucky. Okay, that's the real leader of the party. This is the guy. So McConnell's the one who influences committee assignments and does all that good stuff, just like Paul Ryan does in the House of Representatives. That's why you typically hear Ryan and McConnell being mentioned together, right? Because they essentially have the same sort of responsibilities. Okay. There are also minority and majority whips, same as the House of Representatives. The majority whip for the Senate is actually John Cornyn, who is your senator from here from Texas. All right. Understand that there's a little bit of difference in terms of the committees. This is where Congress gets into some of this nuanced aspect, right? So when you assign members to committees, the Democrats use the steering committee, right? So they steer Democrats to where they need to go. The Republicans use the ever so redundant Committee on Committees. That's the actual name of it. And in order to send people to their appropriate committees. All right. In the House, it's a little bit different because the Democrats use the Steering and Policy Committee. They got to change the name a little bit. Republicans still just use that ever so redundant Committee on Committees. All right. And now, how Congress sort of functions and votes. And these are terms that you need to understand. They're sort of vocabulary-based terms, and you'll get test questions on them. Okay. First, do we know what the word delegate means?
It's like a representative of something, right?
What?
It's like a representative of something.
A representative of something or someone. And in fact, if I was to delegate my job to Will Jenkins, what would happen? Will, what would you do? If I told you that I was going to delegate my responsibilities as teacher to you, what would you do? You have no idea. That would make you the new teacher. Okay? That's delegating. Okay? You would get up and you would be like, if a member votes according to the, because you don't know this stuff yet. Right? Okay? But that's what delegating is. Okay? So a delegate, right, the noun version is somebody who is doing something for you. Right? Delegating is giving them the job. Delegate is somebody that's doing something for you. Right? So when you talk about representatives in Congress, they are our delegates. Okay? They represent us. Now, if they actually do represent us and our will, that's called delegate voting or the delegate role of a congressman. And now you would think that that would be all that they did, right? Because they work for us, they should do what we want all the time, right? Okay? It doesn't work like that. And so the delegate role here is not always the manner in which a representative or a senator is going to work. For a variety of reasons, right? One, it's sometimes difficult to determine public opinion, right? So it would be difficult for Pete Olson to know what all, million people in his district, what all 1 million want. It would be really hard for Pete Olson to know that, to be able to act, right? Okay. Additionally, how many of you can name any single piece of legislation currently on the floor in Congress right now? So should Pete Olson listen to you about Bill 113.678C dash whatever? No. Because you don't even know what that is. Alright? Okay, we then have member conviction. Okay? So with this, it's what's called a trust, this should have been underlined, trustee role. Okay? You know what a trustee is? Think about it logically. What does that word sound like? Trust.
Money.
Okay? It's somebody doing something for you that's in your best interest without you really being aware of it. Okay? So when you talk about the trustee role, Pete Olson is sitting in Congress right now and he's sitting there going, okay, you guys have no idea what I'm about to do, but I'm going to do what's in your best interest. Okay? Sometimes with the trustee role, he will actually do the opposite of what you tell him you want. Because he is privy to information as a congressman that you are not. Therefore, he knows things that you don't know that make him more educated and more prepared to vote on an issue. Right? Okay, so think about this for a second. Let's just say for the sake of argument that I was your congressman. Okay? And there was a bill that came to me that dealt with the Marine Corps. Would you guys trust that I would make the right decision about that?
Yeah.
I probably know about the Marine Corps a lot better than any of you, don't I? Will, did you just say you don't know about that?
I mean, I'm not saying you know more than I know more than you, but maybe someone is special than you. Never know, Mr. Baker.
You're absolutely right, I don't. I would be surprised, though, if somebody knows more about the Marine Corps than I do in this room. Okay? Right? Let me give you actually a better example. Right? So you know that the school calendar, the school day changed this year, right? Y'all got out 10 minutes earlier. Did you know that? Okay? So here's the thing. If I'd been able to vote on this, I would not have voted in favor of that. Okay? And in fact, I would have voted in favor of a different proposal that would have caused you to come to school a week earlier.
I was actually in July. I would have enjoyed it.
Or like 16 times the elementary school.
Now,
I'd love to do that.
how many of you would be in favor of me doing that? Not very many of you. It would be a minority of you. But, see, I'm privy to information that you are not. Because I know, and you are unaware, that if you had come to school 1 week earlier, and you had continued to have that extra like 15 minutes to the school day, you could have gone to school 4 days a week.
Really?
And still met the requirement by the state of Texas on the number of minutes that you needed to be in school throughout the calendar year.
Oh, that pisses me off.
Now, how many of you would like to have a 3-day weekend every weekend? Now, how many of you would be upset if I had voted for that plan? But see, a lot of you would have been like, man, I don't want to come back a week earlier. What you doing, man? Why couldn't I get my 10 minutes off early? Because I know things that you don't. That's a trustee role.
Could we go back to that though?
No, we're not going to go back to that.
You only started 17.
Here's the problem. Here's the reason why it wouldn't work. Okay? In reality, the district would actually end up saving money because you wouldn't have to pay for electricity and air conditioning and stuff like that for an extra day. The problem becomes parents being unacceptable of it because most of your parents work Monday through Friday, right? And if you come from a household where mom and dad work, they don't want you sitting at home Friday all by yourself without them there. And then when you take parents that have even younger children that can't stay home by themselves, that causes a problem in terms of childcare, which is why it would never work, it wouldn't pass. But, I mean, at the high school level, it'd be real nice for us, wouldn't it? Okay? Because you're going to find next year when you go to college, you will do everything in your power to ensure that you don't ever have Friday classes. I didn't have Friday classes when I was in college. Alright? You don't want that. Okay, Congress and their staff. Alright? So, one, understand all congressmen have a staff. Their staff is generally partisan. Okay? Meaning that they are people of the same political party that have the same ideology. Alright? Staff in Congress is far more important today than what it has been in recent times. And one of the reasons for that is the fact that they now begin to actually work with legislation. Okay? In fact, they write legislation, which is supposed to be Congress's job, but whatever. Okay? As far as the influences go, we talked about interest groups, we talked about report cards and targeting. Targeting is where they try to get somebody out of office. Okay? We've talked about all that. All right? Caucuses within Congress, we need to have a little bit of a conversation about so you understand. Okay? Congressmen, like high school students, divide themselves into little cliques. Okay? So you have your really big sort of caucuses that would be the Republican and the Democratic caucus. And that pretty much encompasses everybody. In fact, even independents like Bernie Sanders, who claims to be an independent, is a registered independent, was elected as an independent, he caucuses with the Democrats. Right? So when he ran as the Democratic nominee for president, and one of the attacks the Democratic Party lobbed at him was, well, you're not really a Democrat. He was like, look, I sat with the Democrats the entire time I was in Congress. Alright? But you then have smaller subsets or smaller caucuses within Congress. Right? Things like the Black Caucus, right? Hispanic Caucus, Women's Caucus. The Tea Party movement created what they call the Freedom Caucus. Right? And campaign contributions, media, we've gone through this in depth. I needed to get to this though here before we run out of time. Because iron triangles, this is another one of those vocab terms that I'm telling you right now, they love throwing iron triangles on the AP test. Alright? Because it's an issue or it's a concept that students routinely struggle with. Okay? Iron triangles are sometimes called sub-governments, right? Issue networks, policy networks, whatever you want to call them. Okay? Because in reality, what you have is at times you have sort of subsets. All right? So the triangle is this. Okay? You have Congress. You have the interest group. And then you have the bureaucracy. I'm not going to try to spell bureaucracy. Okay? These three work together. Alright? Because they pass legislation, they implement it, right? And they provide, like, knowledge and information. Alright? They all work together. They tell these people how to implement it, right? What's the best way to implement it? They tell these people what information they need to know in writing the legislation. Congress tells the bureaucracy what the provisions are of the legislation. Bureaucracy comes back and tells Congress what they need in legislation in order to get the job done, right? They come back and they tell interest groups, right, what they need or the information that they need in order to get the job done. But what you have is information that's going all around. Now, this is the broadest spectrum of it. But sometimes you'll see iron triangles broken down. Right? It's a committee. And then it's still like an individual interest group. Right? But instead of interest groups in general, right, you have a specific one like the NRA. Right? And then the agency here would be the ATF. Does that make sense? And does that help us understand what iron triangles are? Okay? This might not be a bad thing to put in your notes. Alright? We're out of time, so we'll stop there. Party membership within Congress is the biggest predictor of voting. Just like party membership for individual citizens is the biggest predictor in voting, Republicans vote with Republicans, Democrats vote with Democrats in Congress. Okay? That's pretty much the way it works.